Isolation's Echo. Introducing Nadia Voss, a human centurion hybrid kept in a research facility by the hegemony, and Dr. Eli Thorne, a human scientist who discovers her during his assignment. Forbidden connections. Eli and Nadia develop a secret bond as he visits her outside his authorized duties, discovering her unique perceptions and emotional depth. The Awakening. As Nadia's termination order approaches, Eli confronts his growing feelings while planning their escape from the facility. Flight among stars, their dangerous escape through space, pursued by hegemony forces while learning to survive together in their small vessel. New constellation, finding refuge on a distant outpost, they create a new life together, challenging the hegemony's definition of perfection. Now, here's Part 1. Part 1. Isolation's Echo. The observation chamber gleamed with clinical sterility, its walls a perfect white that reflected the artificial light in ways that made Dr. Eli Thorne squint. He adjusted the collar of his regulation blue uniform and reviewed the facility's inventory checklist on his datapad. 6 months at the Helios Research Station, orbiting the dead star Cova-9, was not how he'd planned to advance his xenobiology career. Third sub-level inventory complete, he muttered into his recorder. Moving to Restricted Section 4. The hegemony hadn't mentioned Restricted Section 4 in his briefing, but then again the hegemony, with its obsession for categorizing all sentient life by efficiency and functionality, rarely shared everything with new assignees. His security badge flickered green against the scanner, and the pneumatic doors parted with a soft hiss. Beyond lay a corridor he hadn't known existed, its walls lined with monitoring equipment far more sophisticated than anything in the main laboratory. "Hello?" Eli called out, his voice echoing. Station Director Valen informed me I should complete a full inventory. No response came, but at the corridor's end a soft blue light pulsed from behind a transparent barrier. Approaching cautiously, Eli discovered it wasn't a laboratory at all but living quarters, sparse but comfortable, with curved furniture and strange geometric patterns adorning the walls. And there, seated cross-legged on the floor, was a woman. No, not entirely human. Her skin had a subtle opalescent quality that shifted with her breathing. Her eyes, when she looked up at him, were deep violet with vertical pupils that widened slightly at his presence. "You're not Mariva," she said, her voice melodic with an unusual resonance. "They always send Mariva on third day." Eli checked his datapad. "I'm Dr. Eli Thorne, newly assigned xenobiologist, and you are Subject 739, but I prefer Nadia." She stood in one fluid motion. "Nadia Voss." "You're not listed in any of the research subjects," Eli said, scanning through his documents. Small sad smile crossed her face. "I wouldn't be. The hegemony doesn't list failures prominently." "Failures?" Nadia approached the barrier, placing her palm against it. "My mother was human, my father, centurion. The hegemony determined their genetic union created irregularities." "You seem perfectly fine to me," Eli said, finding himself drawn closer to the barrier. "Emotionally non-viable," she replied matter-of-factly. "My neural patterns exceed acceptable variance ranges. I feel too much, they say." For the first time, Eli noticed the small implant at the base of her neck, a regulation mood stabilizer, but modified with additional components he didn't recognize. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 7 years, 4 months, 12 days. Nadia turned away, walking to a small viewport that showed the pulsing remnant of Cova-9. "They study how I respond to stimuli, how I process emotions the hegemony deems excessive." Something twisted in Eli's chest, something unprofessional, unscientific, something the hegemony would categorize as inefficient empathy. "Do you have access to entertainment feeds, books, communication?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Nadia laughed, a sound so genuine it seemed out of place in the sterile environment. "I have simulation programs, and occasionally when no one is watching I dance." "Dance?" She moved then, a graceful sweeping motion that reminded Eli of flowing water. "To music only I can hear." The Centurion part of me can sense vibrations from the station's power core. It creates rhythms. Before Eli could respond, a sharp tone sounded from overhead. "Dr. Thorne," came Director Valen's voice. "Your presence is requested in the main laboratory." Nadia's expression fell, but she nodded in understanding. "You should go. They don't like when routines change." "I'll come back," Eli found himself saying, surprising even himself, "to complete the inventory." As he turned to leave, he caught her reflection in the polished floor, standing perfectly still, watching him with those unusual violet eyes, a small flicker of something dangerous lighting within them, hope. And for the first time since joining the Hegemony's scientific division, Eli questioned whether perfection was truly worth the cost of everything that made life remarkable. Forbidden connections, the laboratory door closed behind Eli with a pneumatic hiss, sealing him inside restricted Section 4 for the third time that week. His official logs showed inventory checks, but the truth was more complex and far more dangerous to his standing with the Hegemony. "You came back," Nadia said, her violet eyes brightening as she set aside a holographic puzzle. "I calculated a 67% chance you wouldn't." "I said I would," Eli replied, setting down his datapad and the small package he'd smuggled from the recreation deck. "Do you always quantify human behavior?" "The Hegemony does. I merely adopted their methods." She approached the barrier, studying him with curious intensity. "You've altered your schedule to be here when Director Valen is off duty." Eli smiled. "I can be tactical when necessary." He pressed his security badge against the barrier controls, deactivating the transparent wall between them. It wasn't strictly forbidden for him to enter. His clearance permitted it, but his reasons certainly weren't in any approved protocol. "I brought you something," he said, unwrapping the package to reveal a small botanical specimen. A night blossom from Proxima Centauri's fourth moon, its petals shifting between deep blue and purple as it sensed changes in ambient light. Nadia's reaction was immediate and visceral. She gasped, hands trembling as she reached for the plant, hesitating before making contact. When her fingers finally brushed the velvet petals, tears welled in her eyes. "It's been so long since I touched something living," she whispered. "Something that wasn't sterilized or synthetic." Eli watched her cradle the small pot, struck by how such a simple gesture could evoke such profound emotion. The Hegemony classified excessive emotional responses as inefficient, yet there was nothing wasteful about the wonder illuminating her face. "Tell me about the outside," she said, settling cross-legged on the floor with the blossom. "Not the clinical reports. Tell me what you see." Eli sat across from her, closer than propriety allowed. "There's a nebula visible from the western observation deck, all crimson and gold dust. The station passed through its outer boundary last cycle, and for a moment it looked like we were swimming through fire." "I remember nebulae," Nadia said softly. "From before. My father took me to the edges of the Centurion system when I was small, before the Hegemony determined I was problematic." "What happened to your parents?" Her expression darkened. "Mother was reassigned to an outer colony. Father was denied residency status due to our genetic incompatibility. The Hegemony doesn't approve of emotional attachments that defy optimization protocols." The bitterness in her voice resonated with something growing inside Eli, a frustration with the sterile perfection the Hegemony demanded. "Dance for me," he said suddenly. "To your station rhythms." Surprise flickered across her features, followed by hesitation. "No one has ever asked to see." "I'm asking." Nadia set the plant aside carefully and rose to her feet. At first, her movements were tentative, arms extending cautiously as if testing invisible boundaries. Then, as if hearing some silent crescendo, her body began to flow, spinning, reaching, bending in ways that defied the rigid efficiency the Hegemony valued. Eli sat transfixed. Her dance wasn't technically perfect. It followed no established pattern. Yet it contained something he'd never seen in the choreographed performances approved for public consumption: authentic joy. When she finished, both were breathing harder than the physical exertion warranted. That was... Eli struggled to find words that wouldn't diminish what he'd witnessed. Inefficient, Nadia supplied with a small smile. Excessive, emotionally unregulated. Beautiful, he corrected, rising to stand before her. Genuinely, uncommonly beautiful. Something shifted between them, a recognition that transcended the clinical environment. Eli found himself reaching for her hand, his fingertips brushing against hers. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through his chest. "Dr. Thorne," came a voice from his communicator, shattering the moment. "An irregularity has been detected in the barrier system of restricted Section 4. Please confirm status." Eli quickly stepped back, activating his communicator. "Routine diagnostic. I'm running tests on the containment parameters." "Acknowledged. Complete your report by next cycle." When the line went silent, Nadia was already retreating to the far side of her quarters, the night blossom clutched protectively against her. "You should go," she said quietly. "They monitor fluctuations in my emotional responses. They'll detect the aberration." Eli reactivated the barrier, his professional demeanor returning like a mask sliding into place. But before leaving, he pressed his palm briefly against the transparent surface. "Your emotions aren't aberrations, Nadia. They're the most honest thing in this entire station." As the door sealed behind him, Eli realized he had crossed a line, one the hegemony had drawn with clinical precision. And for the first time in his career, he found himself not caring. In the sterile corridor, he made a decision that would alter both their fates irrevocably. The awakening. The message on Eli's datapad glowed with bureaucratic finality. Subject 739 scheduled for neural recalibration, terminal phase, authorization, hegemony council. His hands trembled as he read the words again. Neural recalibration, the hegemony's clinical euphemism for complete personality erasure. They would keep Nadia's body functioning while eliminating everything that made her who she was. In 3 cycles, she would cease to exist. Eli paced his sparse quarters, mind racing through regulations and protocols he'd spent years memorizing but now desperately wanted to circumvent. The hegemony valued his work. His research on xenobiological adaptation had earned him recognition among the scientific elite. But that would mean nothing if he defied a council directive. Priority message from Director Valen, announced his room's communication system. Your presence is requested for preparatory briefing regarding Subject 739. Eli composed himself, straightened his uniform, and headed toward the director's office. Each step felt heavier than the last. Director Valen was a tall, severe woman, whose gray hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her perpetually stern expression even further. Dr. Thorne, she acknowledged without looking up from her console. You've reviewed the recalibration notice? Yes, Director, Eli replied, keeping his voice professionally neutral. May I ask why the procedure has been accelerated? My understanding was that Subject 739 was a long-term study. Valen's eyes narrowed slightly. The hegemony doesn't justify its decisions to field researchers, Doctor. However, she added, sliding a data crystal across her desk, recent emotional fluctuations in the subject have raised concerns about containment integrity. Your own logs show unusual activity during your inventory sessions. Eli felt cold sweat form along his spine. Standard stimulus response testing, Director. Nothing outside protocol parameters. Indeed. Valen's tone suggested she believed otherwise. You'll oversee preparation of the neural mapping equipment. We begin in 3 cycles. As Eli left the office, the weight of the data crystal in his pocket felt like a singularity, pulling his world into its crushing gravity. He waited until he reached an unmonitored maintenance corridor before reviewing its contents. The crystal contained Nadia's complete file, not the sanitized version in the official database, but everything. Her childhood on the Centurion border colonies, her parents' legal battles to keep her, and the gradual process by which the hegemony had stripped away her rights, reclassifying her from person to subject. And buried within the technical data was something else, coordinates to a small research vessel scheduled for decommissioning. The kind of vessel that would have enough life support for 2 people to reach the outer territories, beyond hegemony jurisdiction. Eli's heart raced as he realized the implications. Director Valen hadn't given him this information accidentally. She was offering him a choice. When he entered Restricted Section 4 that evening, Nadia was sitting motionless before the viewport, the night blossom wilting slightly in her hands. "They're going to erase me," she said without turning around. Her voice carried no surprise, only a quiet resignation that pierced Eli more deeply than terror would have. "I accessed the medical preparations being made. Neural recalibration." "I know," Eli said, deactivating the barrier and stepping inside. "I've been assigned to prepare the equipment." Now she turned, her violet eyes searching his face. "Will it hurt?" The simple question, so human, so fundamentally concerned with the experience rather than the outcome, broke something inside him. In 3 quick strides, Eli crossed the room and pulled Nadia into his arms. "It's not going to happen," he whispered against her hair, feeling her stiffen in surprise before slowly relaxing into his embrace. "I won't let them take you." "The hegemony doesn't negotiate emotional exceptions," she said, though her arms tightened around him. "Then we don't negotiate." Eli pulled back just enough to meet her gaze. "We leave. Tonight." Her eyes widened. "That's impossible. The security protocols are designed to keep others out, not keep you in. Not if you have the right codes." He showed her the data crystal. "Director Valen gave me this. I think she wants us to try." Nadia's expression cycled through disbelief, hope and fear so quickly it would have confirmed every hegemony concern about her emotional instability. To Eli, it only confirmed her humanity. "Why would you risk everything?" she asked, her hands trembling as they rested against his chest. "Your career, your standing." Instead of answering with words, Eli leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Nadia responded with an intensity that made the room seem to fade around them. When they finally separated, both breathless, Eli rested his forehead against hers. "Because in a universe obsessed with perfection," he said softly, "I found something real." Nadia smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face and sent warmth cascading through Eli's chest. "When do we leave?" 2 hours. Pack nothing that can be tracked. I'll handle the rest." As he reluctantly pulled away to make preparations, Nadia caught his hand. "Eli, what happens if we fail?" He interlaced his fingers with hers, feeling the slight difference in her skin texture, the heritage the hegemony had deemed flawed. "Then we fail together. But we'll be free, even if only for a moment." In the cold calculations of the hegemony, their plan had minimal chance of success. But as Eli left to set their escape in motion, he realized that some equations couldn't be solved with logic alone. Some required faith. Flight Among Stars alarms wailed throughout the station as Eli and Nadia raced through the maintenance tunnels. Red emergency lights pulsed along the corridors, casting eerie shadows that seemed to reach for them with each flash. "Security protocols, initiated in Sectors 7 through 12, announced the automated system. "All personnel report to designated safety zones. This is not a drill." Eli gripped Nadia's hand tighter as they navigated the labyrinthine passages. The small research vessel, their only hope, waited in docking bay 3-4 levels below their current position. "They've discovered I'm missing sooner than expected," Nadia gasped as they paused at an intersection. She still clutched the night blossom, now protected in a small stasis container Eli had provided. "Director Valen must have initiated the evacuation," Eli said, checking his datapad. "It's actually helping us. The automated systems are opening emergency routes." A mechanical grinding echoed through the tunnel as blast doors began closing in sequence. Eli pulled Nadia forward, ducking beneath a descending barrier just before it sealed behind them. "The vessel is registered as DRT 5582, Eli explained as they descended through an emergency shaft. "It's scheduled for decommissioning, but the engines and life support are fully functional." Nadia's expression was tense with concentration. "The hegemony will track it." Not if we remove the locator beacon before jumping to hyperspace. I've already programmed coordinates for the outer territories. They reached the lower levels where the air grew colder and carried the scent of engine coolant. The docking bay doors loomed ahead, sealed. Restricted access, Eli muttered, his fingers flying over the control panel. They've locked down all transports. Nadia stepped forward, placing her hand beside his on the panel. My Centurion genetics, they might help. She closed her eyes, concentrating as her opalescent skin began to emit a subtle glow. Our bioelectric fields can sometimes interface with certain technologies. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the panel flickered, the security protocols stuttered, and the massive doors began to slide open. How did you? Eli began. The hegemony didn't study everything about me, Nadia replied with a hint of pride. Some things I kept to myself. The docking bay beyond was cavernous and dimly lit. Various research vessels stood in their berths, silent sentinels in the emergency lighting. DRT-55A2 was docked at the far end, a sleek, utilitarian craft designed for extended research missions. They had crossed half the distance when the main doors hissed open behind them. Dr. Thorne. Director Valen's voice echoed across the bay. She stood flanked by 2 security officers, their neural disruptors drawn. This action violates 17 separate hegemony protocols. Eli pushed Nadia behind him protectively. The recalibration violates every principle of sentient rights, Director. You know that, or you wouldn't have given me the data crystal. Valen's expression remained impassive. The crystal was given to prepare you for the procedure, Doctor. Your interpretation reveals concerning emotional compromise. Then why aren't you shooting? Eli challenged. Your security officers have clear targets. A moment of tense silence stretched between them. Then, almost imperceptibly, Valen's rigid posture softened. Security, secure the perimeter, she ordered. I will handle this personally. The officers hesitated, then retreated to the doors. When they were out of earshot, Valen approached, her voice dropping to a near whisper. The vessel's emergency protocols are keyed to my biometric signature. You have approximately 12 minutes before the automated systems override my security delay. She pressed a small device into Eli's hand. This will disable the locator beacon permanently. The outer territories are lawless, but the settlement on Vega Prime has a history of accepting anomalies. Eli stared at her in disbelief. Why are you helping us? Valen's severe expression cracked, revealing something ancient and sorrowful beneath. Because 30 years ago I made a different choice. I chose the hegemony over someone She stopped herself. Some equations have no perfect solutions, Dr. Thorne. Now go, before I recalculate my variables. With a curt nod, she turned and strode toward the doors, calling loudly, Initiate full lockdown. The subjects are attempting to breach the eastern airlock. Eli and Nadia raced to the vessel, the entry ramp descending at their approach. Inside, the compact bridge hummed with standby power, the navigation system already glowing with the coordinates Eli had remotely programmed. Strap in, he instructed, taking the pilot's seat while Nadia secured herself beside him. His hands flew across the controls, initiating the launch sequence as warning lights flashed throughout the docking bay. Unauthorized departure imminent, announced the station's automated system. Emergency countermeasures activating in 10, 9. The engines roared to life, vibrating through the vessel's frame. 8, 7. Docking clamps disengaged with metallic clangs. 6, 5. Nadia reached across the console, her fingers entwining with Eli's for a brief steadying moment. 4, 3. Ready? Eli asked, his thumb poised over the launch control. 2. Nadia nodded, her violet eyes reflecting the stars visible through the viewport. For the first time in 7 years. 1. Eli slammed the control forward. The vessel lurched, then shot from the docking bay into the vast darkness of space. Behind them, the Helios research station grew smaller, its perfect white geometry diminishing against the backdrop of the dead star it orbited. Initiating hyperspace. Jump, Eli announced, activating the device Valen had given him. The locator beacon signal flatlined on the monitoring screen. In 30 seconds, we'll be beyond their reach. Nadia unbuckled her restraints and moved to stand beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Through the viewport, the stars began to elongate as the hyperspace drive engaged. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Eli reached up to cover, her hand with his. "I don't know, and that's the most honest answer I've given in years." As the vessel leapt into hyperspace, leaving the hegemony and its perfect order behind, Eli realized that for the first time since he could remember, he was experiencing an emotion the hegemony had never approved: freedom. In the soft blue glow of the instrument panels, he pulled Nadia down into a kiss that contained no calculations, no efficiency, and no certainty. Only the beautiful chaos of two hearts, finding each other amid the endless stars. Part 5. New Constellation. 6 months had transformed the abandoned mining outpost on Vega Prime into something resembling a home. Solar collectors gleamed on the curved roof, catching the light from the system's twin suns. A small garden flourished in the biodome Eli had constructed from salvaged parts, the night blossom now accompanied by dozens of other specimens they'd gathered from the planet's unusual ecosystem. Inside, Nadia stood before a makeshift laboratory station, her hands steady, as she adjusted a microscope focused on a cellular sample. The opalescent quality of her skin seemed more pronounced now, no longer dulled by the sterile environment of the research station. "The native flora shows remarkable adaptive properties," she said as Eli entered, carrying supplies from their latest expedition to the nearby settlement. "The cellular regeneration rate is nearly triple what we'd expect under normal conditions." Eli set down his pack and moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Sounds like someone else I know who's been thriving in unlikely conditions." Nadia leaned back against him, a smile spreading across her face, one of many expressions she no longer attempted to suppress. "The hegemony would classify your statement as emotionally indulgent hyperbole." "The hegemony can classify itself into a black hole," Eli murmured against her neck. "They wouldn't recognize true adaptation if it restructured their perfect system." Their gentle moment was interrupted by a signal from the communication array, a rare occurrence this far from established routes. Eli moved to the console, his expression growing serious as he read the incoming message. "It's from Director Valen," he said, surprise evident in his voice. Encrypted and routed through 7 different relays. Nadia joined him at the console, her violet eyes scanning the decrypted text. "She's warning us. The hegemony has dispatched research vessels to the outer territories. They're looking for us." "Not just us," Eli replied, pointing to a specific section of the message. "They're searching for others like you, human Centurion hybrids who escaped classification. Apparently, there are more than the hegemony acknowledged." Nadia sank into a chair, processing this revelation. "Others who were deemed emotionally non-viable? Or others who simply refused to be categorized?" Eli continued reading. "Valen has included coordinates. A hidden settlement on the 3rd moon, of Vega Prime. She says there's a community there established by those who've rejected hegemony optimization. Outside their window, the twin suns began their daily eclipse of each other, casting the landscape in a strange, beautiful twilight that existed nowhere else in the known systems." Nadia watched the phenomenon with the same wonder she'd shown the first time they'd witnessed it together. "When I was kept in isolation," she said quietly, "I used to imagine finding others who understood what it meant to feel deeply, to experience life beyond the measured parameters of acceptable response. I never believed such a place could actually exist." Eli knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "We don't have to go. We've built something here, something real. If we're careful, we can stay hidden." Nadia shook her head, a new determination lighting her features. "The hegemony found me once. They'll eventually find us here. But more importantly," she touched his face gently, "there are others who deserve to know they're not alone, that their differences aren't defects." It could be dangerous, Eli cautioned, though he already recognized the resolve in her expression. The beautiful, stubborn emotion that the hegemony had tried so hard to recalibrate out of existence. Everything worthwhile is, she replied with a smile. You taught me that when you risked everything to help me escape. They spent the evening preparing for the journey, packing their research, specimens, and the few personal belongings they'd acquired. As night fell, they stood together on the outpost's small observation platform, gazing up at the stars and the faint outline of Vega Prime's third moon hanging among them. I've been working on something, Nadia said, leading Eli back inside to her workstation. She retrieved a small device similar to the mood stabilizer she'd once been forced to wear, but fundamentally altered. It's a neural harmonizer designed to amplify the bioelectric field I used to open the docking bay doors. Eli examined it with professional curiosity. You've reconfigured hegemony technology to enhance the variabilities they tried to suppress. Ironic, isn't it? She attached the device to the base of her neck, where the stabilizer had once been. With this, I can help protect the settlement if the hegemony comes searching. It's time my emotional irregularities became a strength rather than a diagnosis. As dawn approached, they loaded their vessel, now repainted and renamed Aberration, in a defiant nod to their hegemony classification. The engines hummed to life, gentler after Eli's careful modifications over the months. Ready for another leap into the unknown? He asked as they settled into the cockpit. Nadia reached across the console, intertwining her fingers with his as she had during their escape. With you? Always. The vessel rose smoothly, leaving behind the outpost that had sheltered them through their first taste of freedom. As they accelerated toward the third moon, Nadia gazed out at the vast expanse of stars, not with the resignation of someone viewing them from behind a barrier, but with the anticipation of one who had learned to navigate their infinite possibilities. Hegemony believes perfection lies in elimination of variance, she said softly. But look at the stars, Eli. No two shine exactly alike, yet together they create something magnificent. Eli smiled, programming their course toward the coordinates Valen had provided. Perhaps that's what the hegemony fears most, that true perfection isn't found in uniformity, but in the beautiful chaos of difference. As the aberration accelerated toward their new destination, Eli realized they were no longer simply running. From the hegemony, they were moving toward something greater, a community of variances, a constellation of beautiful imperfections. Through the viewport, the third moon grew larger, its surface marked with hidden valleys and unexpected oases. Somewhere on that unlikely sanctuary waited others who had been labeled defective, unstable, or simply too much. Look, Nadia whispered as they began their descent. In a valley below, lights blinked in a pattern too regular to be natural. AI, signal, a welcome, a recognition. Eli squeezed her hand as emotion, unregulated, unquantified, perfect in its rawness, welled in his chest. They're waiting for us. The aberration descended toward the lights, carrying its precious cargo of research specimens and, most importantly, two beings who had discovered that sometimes what the universe labeled broken was simply waiting for the right conditions to become whole. As they landed among a community of the differently perfect, Nadia turned to Eli, her violet eyes reflecting the strange new world that awaited them. "Thank you for seeing me," she said simply. Not as a project, but as a person. Eli pulled her close, his scientist's mind marveling at how the most complex equation he'd ever encountered had yielded the simplest answer. Love, in all its beautiful imperfection, was the only calculation that truly mattered.